Okay, well, happy Friday afternoon to you all. It is Friday, August 20th, and I'm headed over to my warehouse to swap the little Trail 125 over for a different bike. I wanted to give a little update on the CT125 project. I haven't really done any videos or vlogs or anything about it, the ownership experience or the add-ons or anything that I've put on there, but it's been a great little bike so far. I don't have very many miles on it. I think it's right under 800 miles right now. I did a couple of little road trips with it, 400 mile, 300 mile range kind of stuff, and it does okay, but it's pretty limited on top speed compared to the Super Cub, so I have to choose different routes for it. But anyway, just a little recap of the add-ons that I've put onto it. I've got the op mid gauge down here that somebody was just asking me about a couple days ago, so I figured it was time to go ahead and do this review. The op mid gauge gives a much clearer, easier to read view than the factory gauge. The factory one was almost impossible to see in direct sunlight unless the sunlight was right behind you and there was no glare on the gauge. It's just impossible to read. And it does also include a gear indicator, but it's not a sensor in the transmission like it is on the Super Cub or the Grom and the Monkey and stuff like that. What this does is it figures it out through engine RPM and wheel speed. So sometimes it's not 100% accurate, but anyway. The tack works really well. I like it. The one thing that I do have to get into and reprogram in here are the warning lights. There's a shift warning light, I think, and there's also a temperature warning light that goes off almost right away when this motor heats up. So I don't know if you can see that. It's in Celsius right now, 31.2, because the engine's cold. And as this sits here and warms up, when it gets up around 50 degrees Celsius, something like that, it starts flashing a red light, and I think that's just a temperature warning, but I can go in and reprogram the gauge and get rid of that. So anyway, back to the upgrades. I've got the Zeta Adventure windscreen on here, which is this piece. You can see the mounting bracket right there, and it's got its own accessory mount that's built into it here, a 7/8 inch bar, and on top of that I have a Moto Pumps bar mount, GPS mount for Garmin GPS, and then of course I got my Zumo XT sitting up here that I swap around between different bikes. Great unit. I have the quad lock inductive charger with the anti-vibration mount, so it kind of reduces the impact vibration on the phone, so that's nice. It doesn't need any cord or anything. You just plug right in, and this is hardwired into the bike underneath the plastics here. Switch with the ignition, of course. It's not constantly hot. What else? This is a Kitaco accessory bar here. I didn't really need that after I got this mount, or the windscreen with its own mount, but I can put more things down here. I might put, some like a drink holder or whatever, or potentially a roll chart holder down here. So I'll have, multiple navigation aids if I'm really out in the sticks, which is probably where I'll take this, just deep off-road, single track, off in the forest, having fun. I'm not going anywhere fast, but it can get through places where bigger bikes can't. I've got the Adventure double take folding mirrors on here. I like these on my other bikes. For some reason, I'm noticing this one is always a little bit floppy. I might flip over this arm and see if it gets a little bit better grip, but it's always a little loose, and I've got it cranked as tight as it goes. So overall, these are great mirrors, but in this installation, it's a little floppy. And then I've got a couple of extra ram balls that I put on here for attaching, trackers or anything else that I might want to strap onto the bike, cameras in particular, so I can, crane a GoPro over here or something, looking around wherever I want to. Working forward, I've got the Motoskill headlight guard and front rack right here. This isn't going to be really a good perch for anything heavy because you don't want extra weight for inertia on the front bars, but I could probably strap a small spares pack, maybe a couple of tubes or something like that in a roll bag or dry bag or something up here. Just can't be very big. The Motoskill headlight guard came with screws that were too short. They did not reach all the way in to the threaded bolt that's attached to these top shock tubes here, and I ended up stripping those out a little bit, so I had to go in and retap them, rethread them, and get longer bolts to put in here. I've got an install video on a lot of this stuff that I'll try to put together in some of the headaches that I went through, but it's just minor stuff, you know, just takes a little extra time than it should have. What else? So the Motoskill engine guard is a nice piece, and people kind of gave me flack, and why do you need an engine guard on a little bike? Well, if you look from this angle, it's exactly the same width as the foot pegs, so what that's going to do is give you a little bit of rock coverage against your feet if you're crawling through crap, you know, water crossings, whatever. I've had my boot get trapped and get pulled under the foot peg underwater a few times by some rocks that I didn't know were there. So that's just a little extra protection for your foot and, you know, tip over or whatever. I mean, this bike's not really going to break much if it tips over, but that is wide enough on both sides to pretty much protect everything on the side of the bike and not get into your handlebars. I have not put on my bark busters yet. I do have them, I just need to put them on, and it's the full frame type that come over here and clamp on the bar, and it's got an aluminum, you know, frame that goes on there, and then a plastic deflector, so those will be on there soon. I have not mounted my driving lights that I'm going to put on here, just to give me a little bit of extra visibility at night, and also on the road, you know, better conspicuity. What else? Factory exhaust, nothing else has changed there. As far as the running gear, nothing's changed. It's all just bolt-ons. And then the last piece is the Motoskill center guard. That thing's nice. I'll throw a tunnel bag in there, a little dry bag, or just use my hydration pack and strap it down in there. So that's it. I think that's about all of my upgrades. Can't think of anything I missed. Of course, you know, I got the 6-gallon milk crate strapped on the back right now, just with some heavy-duty zip ties. It's not going anywhere. Use that for my little grocery runs and running around town, and that's pretty much what this bike has been doing for the last 7-8 months, however long I've had it. It's just been my little grocery getter, running around, having fun. I haven't really done any long road trips or adventure moto camping with it yet, which is why I purchased it, but hopefully I'll get into that this fall. So anyway, time to get on the road. Got to get to the warehouse. Talk a little more about it as I'm rolling down the road. Okay, so here we go. The temp warning hasn't gone off yet, but it's about to. You can see the temperature rising pretty quickly here. 76 Celsius. It gets right up to about, I think it's 85, 89, somewhere up near what would be water boiling point, and it starts freaking out. But of course, this is a air oil-cooled motor. It's not going to be boiling off any water unless you splash through some. So, as far as road suitability and, you know, travelability, whatever you want to call it, of the Trail 125 versus the Super Cub, I took this on a ride to Cotton Bowl Speedway up in the Austin area, and, you know, with all of our running around and return trip and everything, it was about a 400-mile trip, I guess, a little over, and my son went with us on my Cub, and Adrian was along, so the three of us went up there to meet Neil, and Neil came in from Louisiana to watch the World of Outlaws over there at the Cotton Bowl Speedway. So we did this road trip, and it was about a 4 or 5 day moto camp trip. We had fun, but I'll tell you, the ride on the highway getting there was zero fun. Okay, so for anybody that's wanting an idea of what the little CT125, Trail 125 can do on the highway, you're looking at it. This is it. Full tilt boogie into a fairly nasty headwind here, and the best I'm able to get out of it is 53. That's it. Game over. It's not going any faster. On flat ground without headwind, I can get maybe 56 to 58 out of it. The highest I've seen, period, ever was 62, but that must have been, you know, getting pulled along by a draft or something. So highway chops this thing does not have. 53, 55, it's kind of all that there is to it. I don't know if you can
see the guys ahead of me there. They're on the 2 Super Cubs, and they're able to pull 60 plus in this pretty easily. So they're easily able to outpace me, even though it's the same motor. It's retuned for mid-range and less top end. I'm going to get over and let this big truck come by. Just it's absolute torture on this thing, stuck at only 45 miles an hour most of the time. If you're going up any hill of any kind, or you have headwind, you're lucky to crack 50 miles an hour on this bike, where the Super Cubs can easily pull 10 miles an hour better than that, just because, you know, they're slipperier, aerodynamically speaking. There's not as much resistance, and the gearing is different, and the engine on this is tuned for a little bit more mid-range, a little less top end. So those are all three things that don't do well for long, high-speed running, and the Cub does that just a little bit better. So yeah, there's my red temperature warning light, 83 Celsius, and it's going nuts. So this bike is much more comfortable at around 45 miles an hour or less. It's much better on rough surfaces, off-road, gravel, whatever. It does much better than the Super Cub does. The suspension on it is valved better than the Super Cub, so it seems to handle bumps better, even though technically, if you look at the specs, it has less suspension travel, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know if this published specs from Honda are goofed up, or if that's actually true, but it has a less suspension throw in the rear than the Super Cub does, but it feels better. I don't know. How does that work? Anyway, I've had it off on gravel trails and blasting it around a few times, and it does great for that. It's a trail bike, and that's its home ground. So long road trips, not so great. So my thoughts on this for doing my long trips, one of my tentative plans for it is to do the Trans-America Trail next year, and if I do that, I definitely need to up gear this thing for highway runs, and then when I get into the long trails where I know I'm going to be off-road for, you know, most of the day or multiple days, then I'll change down to a lower geared sprocket. You know, I think it's got a 13 on it right now. I'll probably put a 15 or 16 on it for road use, and either go back to the 13 or maybe even a 12 or something like that for the off-road stuff. And it's much easier to just change the front sprocket, because when you get into changing multiple teeth in the rear, you can end up with needing a different size chain or whatever, you know, pretty drastic axle adjustments to take up slack, that sort of thing. Anyway, so the other option is I might put a big bore kit on this. I've heard pretty good reviews and testimonials out there from people that have put 143cc big bore kit on it, which is kind of a mild big bore kit, and it allows you to retain the use of the factory head and factory everything else. It's just a new piston and a new cylinder. Everything else is pretty much interchangeable. Now, you're going to have to upgrade, obviously, to a bigger injector or do some kind of fueling to accommodate for the additional consumption and power and all that. But that's a somewhat low impact upgrade. The next step up in the possibilities there are 160 something cc kits, and then there are also real big ones like the Kitico Neo 181cc kit, and that's a complete kit. It comes with everything, new head, new cams, you name it. It's a full kit minus the fuel controller. So you got to figure out what you're using for your fueling, whether it's going to be the factory ECU with some modifications, or if you're going to step over to something totally different. You know, piggyback controllers like the Power Commander 3 or Power Vision 3 from Dynojet, or there's a couple of others out there, A-Data or something like that. I can't remember the names. So obviously that's a much more expensive kit. The Neo comes in at right at $1,000 for the whole kit, not including installation, not including fuel computer. So with it all done, if you can do the labor yourself, you're probably looking at somewhere in the $1,600 range, but it takes this engine up to 22 horsepower or something like that, somewhere between 18 and 23 horsepower depending on how far you go with it. So that's insane comparing to the factory level, which is 8 horsepower barely, high 7s, low 8s. So that's a significant difference. And with that, you could go with a much higher gear ratio, even for street use, and you would still have plenty of oomph for the off-road stuff. So I don't know, that's a possibility, but when you start talking about big bore kits and changing the factory internals of Honda's sewing machine precision, then obviously you're looking at possibly lower reliability. You know, if it's put together wrong or not balanced properly or whatever, then yeah, obviously you're going to generate problems for yourself. And for the long crazy rides that I do, they're torture test rides, so I would want to make sure that whatever I'm putting in there is very reliable and I don't have to worry about longevity and ending up stranded somewhere with a blown motor. And then, you know, of course, there's the cost. People talk about, you know, this is such an expensive bike already at, you know, almost $5,000 out the door by the time you get done with taxes and all that. $5,000 can get you a lot of dual sport bike, especially in the used market. You can get, you know, 300 class, 500 class, 600 class bikes that are much more capable than this, but they're a different animal. If you take the $5,000 price of this and then you're adding another $1,000 and change for a big bore kit and all that, then you're up into the $6,000 range, and it is a pretty good argument for saying that's not money well spent, because you're still not going to have a bike that's as capable as far as suspension and, you know, overall long haul chops as a larger bike. But anyway, it just depends on what you're after. I see both sides of the argument, and I don't really have a preference either way. If I'm going to keep this bike, which I probably will, then I will big bore it, just because it's a little anemic in current format to use for anything except for, you know, surface street runs like this and very mild off-road trails. But the reality of it is, to get to those off-road trails, you got to travel highway miles or trailer it, which, you know, it's always a possibility, but I never like trailering. I'd much rather just go, and I ain't waiting. So anyway, that's kind of the state of the affairs with the Trail Cub CT125. I like it, great little machine. I love it as a around town city bike run around. It's fantastic. It's got enough suspension throw, and it's valve damped well enough that it handles city chores actually better than the Super Cub does. But the limited power and limited top speed is really the downfall for this as a more well-rounded bike in comparison to the Super Cub. They are different bikes with different intentions, although they share the same heritage and the same basic construction, same engine, same everything else. One of them is a road bike, the other one's a trail bike.